Hello and welcome to this wall-to-wall live coverage of this historic papal trip to Iraq, the first ever papal visit to these historic lands in the Middle East. Pope Francis touching down very shortly for a 3.5-day trip, which will take him across Iraq to many different cities, beginning with Baghdad, where he's landing at the international airport. There we see the honor guard waiting for the Pope's arrival. And there is Pope Francis' airplane, the Alitalia flight AZ4000. Took off from Rome about 4.5 hours ago. Flew over Greece and Cyprus, also Israel and Jordan, on the way to Iraq there, where the Holy Father is making an historic trip to visit the Christians there, and also to encourage interreligious dialogue and human fraternity. These are hallmarks of his pontificate, reaching out to those on the peripheries, always trying to give an encouraging word and gesture to those in difficulty. We can say that the Christians of Iraq have been in particular difficulty over the last decades, in particular since 2014, where in Mosul and in the Nineveh Plain in Iraqi Kurdistan in the north, ISIS took many of the cities that have since been taken back, but the rebuilding of the Christian presence in those areas has been very difficult. The Pope going, as he said in a video message in the lead up to his trip, as a pilgrim of peace and also a pilgrim of fraternity, hoping to bring encouragement to the peoples of Iraq. I'm Alan Holdren, EWTN's Vatican Bureau Chief, bringing to you this live commentary of these events that are very historic, in particular for the Iraqi people, but I think that all of us around the world look on with a certain fascination, and that this trip would take place amidst this COVID pandemic, the Pope also going into an area of conflict, security concerns, but he said that he couldn't not go. Pope John Paul II in the year 2000 in the Jubilee wanted to make a trip to Iraq but wasn't able. Here Pope Francis in his general audience this last Wednesday, he said the Iraqi people needed this. He needed to go. He couldn't not go. There we see the Iraqi and Vatican flags on the front of that Alitalia plane that's carrying the Pope and his entourage, and also more than 70 journalists and operators, communicators, including 2 from EWTN. We've got Colin Flynn, our correspondent on the flight, along with Alexei Gotovsky, who's serving as a producer and cameraman. They'll be bringing you coverage of this trip throughout the entire weekend, these 3.5 days of travel across the different parts of Iraq. You can follow them by way of our social media. It's EWTN Vatican on Facebook, and also on Twitter, and then also by way of their personal accounts. It's Colin Flynn and Alexei Gotovsky. And also we've got Alejandro Bermudez, the executive director of ASI Group, who's up in the northern part of Iraq, in Iraqi Kurdistan, awaiting the Pope there, with the Christians, the majority of Christians that live in Iraq are in Iraqi Kurdistan, in particular in the area of Erbil. So it really is an amazing thing to be watching these images. This has never been seen. No Pope has ever been to Iraq before. Pope Francis touching down there at Baghdad's international airport is really quite the sight. So the Pope will be met there on the tarmac by the Prime Minister of Iraq, in addition to an entourage there of state authorities, but also church authorities. It's an important moment to see the diversity of the Catholic Church also across Iraq, which includes the presence of Latin Rite Catholics, Chaldeans, Syro-Catholics, and also Armenian Catholics. And we'll see that throughout this trip as he visits with the communities in their churches. Later on today, he'll be meeting with bishops, priests, religious, consecrated persons, and seminarians, and also catechists in the Syro-Catholic Cathedral there in Baghdad. It's Our Lady of Salvation Church, which was the site of an unfortunate massacre during Mass. Extremists erupted into Mass, killing 47 people in 2010 that have been referred to as martyrs. The Pope will surely be remembering them today. He also on his schedule between now and then as the official welcome ceremony at the Presidential Palace in Baghdad, a courtesy visit to the President of the Republic, and also a meeting with authorities, civil society, and the diplomatic corps. You see the airplane coming into position there for the Pope to exit the airplane and go right down that red carpet, where he'll be welcomed by delegations from state authorities and also from the church. Again, the two keys to understanding this trip are the visit to the struggling Christian community in Iraq, which has been decimated by conflict and persecution, especially over the last 6, 7, 8 years. There were more than 1 million Catholics, Christians in Iraq up until 2014, and so many families have left due to the ongoing difficulties. The Vatican released numbers earlier this week saying that there were 590,000 Catholics of the different rites left in Iraq. There have been many other reports saying that the number is much less as an unofficial number. And also the second key is human fraternity. Pope Francis has made this a key theme of his pontificate, advocating to consider ourselves among all the different major monotheistic religions as brothers. So that's where the theme of this papal trip comes from, which is "You are all brothers." And we'll see the Pope at an interreligious meeting tomorrow. That's Saturday, March the 6th, on the plain of Ur, the birthplace of Abraham, the father of the three monotheistic religions, as Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And he'll also be making a courtesy visit to the Grand Ayatollah al-Sistani in Najaf, which is there near the plain of Ur. He's the Shiite leader. It's a major occasion for the Pope also to send a message of peace and fraternity. The big day for the Catholic Church. Every single day has a meeting with Catholic officials and Catholic faithful. The big day for the major visit to Iraqi Kurdistan in the north is March 7th. That's on Sunday, where the Pope will go to Erbil and also to Mosul and Karakosh. And he'll be visiting sites where Christians have undergone major persecution. And he'll be also praying for the victims of war. There at a church in Mosul, which until just years ago was under ISIS control. I'll be visiting a very small church in the community of Karakosh, known as Baghdad, the Immaculate Conception Parish. It'll be a moment to remember the victims there as well. And then a Holy Mass in the Franso Hariri Stadium in Erbil. That's expected to be attended by thousands of people. Again, the difficulties of having major public events during a pandemic, very present on the minds of people. But they do expect thousands of people to be present, who are reserved a place at that Mass weeks in advance. Something to note as this weekend coverage goes on. During the visit, the Pope will be meeting with the different rites, the different Catholic rites. You see, today he'll be at the Syriac Catholic Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation in Baghdad. Tomorrow, Saturday, he'll be at the Chaldean Cathedral of St. Joseph in Baghdad for Mass. And Sunday, he'll be at the stadium there, celebrating with all of the different communities, which is Syro-Catholic, the Armenian Catholic, Chaldean Catholic, also the Latin Rite Catholic, and also be celebrating one of these Masses in the Chaldean Catholic Rite, the first time a Pope will have done so. There we wait for the head of protocol to open up the doors there. Welcome the Pope. to the tarmac of Baghdad's international airport. Again, the first time a pope has ever been to Iraq. Historic moments here. It's a windy day in Baghdad. Pope Francis stepping off the plane there in his mask. All those on the plane were required to get vaccines in advance of the trip, and all of them wearing masks as is protocol. The Pope waiting for Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi, who's coming to welcome the Pope there at the base of the stairs. Fortunately, one person we won't see there greeting Pope Francis is Archbishop Mitja Leskovar, who's the Apostolic Nuncio, top diplomat, ambassador of the Pope to Iraq, who came down with COVID-19 in the days leading up to this trip. Whereas normally the Apostolic Nuncio would accompany the Pope on every phase of the trip, this time it couldn't be so. See, there's an Iraqi cardinal there to the Pope's right. That's Cardinal Luis Rafael Sacco, the head of the Chaldean Catholics. Was there to welcome the Pope, and also Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Pope's foreign minister, the head of the Secretariat of State of the Vatican. We'll be stepping out of that airplane there in a matter of moments with Pope Francis. A handshake and official welcome from Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kadhimi of Iraq to Pope Francis. They're being greeted also by children, Iraqi children, as he takes his first steps on Iraqi soil, so to speak. They're on the red carpet. The Prime Minister now introducing the Pope to members of the official state delegation to the sound of the band. See, in addition to the state authorities, there are some Catholic priests there, the local prelates in charge of the different communities. There's the Cardinal Rafael Luis Sacco, who's in charge of, he's the Patriarch of Babylon of the Chaldeans, a Catholic community of 200,000 Catholics. There's Archbishop Jean Benjamin Sleiman of the Latin Archdiocese of Baghdad, 300,000 Catholics there. Bishop Ephraim Yusuf Mansour Abba of the Syro-Catholics, and also a representative of the Armenian Catholic community. This is a very familiar sight as the Pope touches down on international trips. This is his 33rd since beginning the pontificate in March of 2013. It's coming up on the 8th anniversary. On March the 13th, he was elected in 2013. Coming up on that 8th anniversary, which the Pope will mark back here in Rome after these 3.5 days in Iraq. He'll be there from today, the 5th of March, until Monday, the 8th of March. Traveling 900 miles across Iraq to the different cities. He'll be in Najaf, go through Nasiriyah on his way to Ur. Today's in Baghdad, and every evening will be spent in Baghdad. Then he'll be going also to Iraqi Kurdistan up in the north. And he'll go to the cities of Mosul, Erbil, and Karakosh. See, it's too windy to wear that skull cap today. There's no possibility of keeping it on his head there. So Pope Francis is about to retire there inside the terminal of the airport for a brief private visit with Prime Minister. And what we'll see afterwards is the Pope heading to the presidential palace, where he'll be meeting with the Iraqi president in a courtesy visit. That's also in private. And then there will be public meetings where the Pope is expected to give speeches to the authorities, civil society, and the diplomatic corps first. And then he'll be moving on to the Syro-Catholic Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation for a meeting with bishops, priests, religious, consecrated persons, seminarians, and catechists. We'll be bringing you live coverage of those events. You can stick with us this entire day for that coverage, and then throughout the next 3 days, where we'll be bringing you wall-to-wall coverage thanks to our team in Alabama at the headquarters of EWTN, and also our Vatican Bureau team, and with a special thanks to everyone at Vatican Media, at the Vatican Television Center, putting in a lot of the work to bring these images to us live from Iraq. Again, if you're just joining us, this is Pope Francis arriving in Baghdad just moments ago to begin this historic first ever apostolic voyage to the nation of Iraq. He'll be dividing his time between the Christian community, the state, and civil society, and also to interreligious dialogue. He'll be meeting with Sunni and Shia Muslim officials, also meeting with members of the Jewish community. He's made this a hallmark of his pontificate, issuing just a year and a half ago the Fratelli Tutti encyclical letter, which speaks about human fraternity, brotherhood among peoples and religions. You see that sister reaching out and touching the Pope's elbow. It's hard even in a pandemic not to reach out and touch the successor Peter as he walks past. All Catholics, of course, looking for a blessing and just being encouraged, I'm sure, by his presence there in their midst. Really see the diversity of the Iraqi people there in that welcoming committee. It's just beautiful music to welcome the Holy Father. For coverage of this and all the different events throughout the weekend, you can tune in to EWTN.com and to EWTN's main broadcast on satellite television, your local cable networks. Feel free to log on to social media to send us a line to say hello, make a comment, or just share in this incredible visit, extraordinary first ever of a Pope in Iraq. Also this evening, for the very first time in history, we could say, for EWTN, we have EWTN News In Depth, a new program that's being offered from the United States, which will also have some coverage focused on this trip. EWTN News Nightly, bringing you different elements of the trip from the people on the ground, also by way of our correspondent Colin Flynn, who's there on site traveling with the Pope. Here we see the Pope sitting down to a private conversation with Prime Minister Mustafa Al-Khadibi to begin his visit, and he'll be moving on to the presidential palace after this for a courtesy visit to the president, and then also he's said to meet with civil society and authorities before going on to meet with representatives of the Catholic Church, from bishops to priests and seminarians to the religious and catechists. That'll take place in a cathedral there, the Syro-Catholic Cathedral of Our Lady of Salvation in Baghdad. And we have people joining us from all over the world. Feel free to write in your comments on social media. And also, if you're keeping track, it's difficult to tell which time zone of the world you're in. But the Pope touching down there for this official welcome at about 2 o'clock p.m. He was a little ahead of time and actually had to fly in circles outside of Baghdad in order to make it a little closer to the appointed time. So at 2 o'clock local time was the official touchdown, and at about 4:40 local time, so 2.5 hours, two and a quarter from now, the Pope will be meeting with those bishops, priests, and religious at the cathedral, the Syro-Catholic Cathedral of Baghdad. And in between now and then, there are a number of events that we'll be bringing you live from Iraq by way of EWTN's media. If you'd like some more information about the trip and the presence of the Christian community there in particular, you can go to CatholicNewsAgency.com and also to ncregister.com for the National Catholic Register and Catholic News Agency coverage leading up to this trip. We're putting in a lot of time and reading up and interviewing people about what this papal trip means to them, about the historic Christian presence there in Iraq, which goes back to the first centuries after Christ. Really is the cradle of civilization there in Mesopotamia. You've got, as you'll see in the logo of the trip, if you have a moment to look at it, it's the outline of the nation of Iraq with the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, showing Baghdad there in the center of those rivers. There's a couple of doves that are sharing an olive branch as a symbol of peace, a date palm, which is a symbol of Iraq, and then writing around the logo, which says, "You are all brothers," in the different major languages of Iraq, which would be Arabic, Kurdish, Aramaic, and then also in English. That's the theme of this trip, a focus of Pope Francis' pontificate, which is "You are all brothers," really putting an emphasis on this idea of human fraternity, which is so dear to the Pope. It's something he's been advocating now for years. He gives his encyclical Fratelli Tutti, or all brothers, to all visitors to the Vatican, all heads of state. Passes it along, and he never passes over an opportunity to invite people to peace. He called himself a pilgrim of peace and fraternity in the lead up to this trip. Really wanted to make this trip, despite the difficulties due to the COVID pandemic and also to security concerns. Said he needed to be there, he needed to make this trip, and he's made similar trips. We could say that this trip could potentially be the most difficult, the riskiest of his pontificate, but he did years ago to go to the Congo, where there was also a high element of risk, and there was a time of peace after his trip. He really did bring encouragement. You could see that not only during the trip, but also in the aftermath. There was a ceasefire called for his presence there. Here we look to something of the same. Many of the Christians there in Iraq are saying that they have high hopes for the Pope's visit, very excited to have him there amongst them. It really is a reason for celebration. You know, despite we're in Lent at the moment as Catholics, it really is a beautiful time for Iraq's Catholics to have the Pope there among them. They've been waiting for this for years. In the year 2000, John Paul II was set to go there, but it didn't work out due to security concerns. And the Pope has said along the last several years that he would like to come to Iraq, he'd like to come to Iraq, and now we see him sitting there in the terminal of Baghdad's international airport. It really is a spectacle, something to behold. And it takes a lot of preparation to get one of these papal trips off the ground. But imagine it just took him 4.5 hours to get there, and there he is. Direct flight from Rome. Took along with him some of his top officials for interreligious dialogue. That's Cardinal Miguel Ángel Ayuso Guichot, who's a Spaniard. He also took Cardinal Leonardo Sandri, a fellow Argentinian, who's in charge of the Congregation for Oriental Churches, which oversees the relationships with the Chaldean Catholics, which are well represented there in Iraq, with Cardinal Luis Rafael Sacco at their head. And also the Syro-Catholics, which is a small community, but a very strong, faithful community in Iraq, and the Armenian Catholics, which is also another small Catholic community there, in addition to the Latin Rite Catholics, which is one of the larger communities, 300,000 according to the official numbers from the Vatican leading up to the trip. And in addition to those two cardinals, Cardinal Sandri and Cardinal Ayuso Guichot, is also Cardinal Fernando Filoni, who is currently the Grand Master of the Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem, based here in Rome, formerly the prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples. Made a trip to Iraq as the prefect of that congregation, also known as Propaganda Fide. And before that, he worked in the Secretariat of State of the Vatican, and before that, in the early 2000s, he was the Apostolic Nuncio, the Pope's ambassador to Iraq. So he was there during the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. And he recently shared that experience and his memories of what went on during that time with our correspondent, TWT News correspondent Colin Flynn, in an interview here in Rome that, if you're interested, it's worth a look on social media. You can find it both on Facebook and on YouTube. And Cardinal Filoni speaking about that experience, and speaking about the beauty and the faith of the Iraqi Catholics. Had nothing but fond memories for his time there. And he stayed there during the conflict. He didn't leave, and for which he was known as being a courageous person. He said, in response to a question from our correspondent, he said, "I didn't do anything different from the local people here." The Iraqis are the courageous ones. They are the ones who have been able to weather this. You know, it has been a very difficult time for them, especially during the ISIS takeover of some of their major Christian cities and towns, as they call them, there in Iraqi Kurdistan. And many have left, and who can blame them? It's been a very difficult time for them, and some of those who have left have come back, some never left at all, and have been able to weather this difficulty. And we hope, Colum also sat down for an interview at a distance with Archbishop Bashar Warda, who is the Chaldean Catholic Archbishop of Erbil in northern Iraq. And he asked them about that. Will there be a continued Christian presence in Iraq? Is there a risk that the Christian presence could be eliminated? And he said, it is a risk. It is a risk. There's no way around that. But of course, he hopes, and we all hope, that that does not happen. And there's a lot that we can all do to, in the rest of the world, to support Christians there. First and foremost, being to pray for them. We can also give them our support, our financial, material support. The main thing they say is they need political support. They need all of us to reach out to our legislators and let them know how important it is for us as Christians in the rest of the world to keep Christians there, to protect them, and to keep them safe. To do what we can to guarantee their religious liberty, through our own policies and the policies of our governments towards nations like Iraq, not only Iraq, but so many nations on earth where Christians are persecuted. You see the great work that Aid to the Church in Need in particular does to help Christians in Iraq and other places in order to maintain a presence. It was just announced in the lead up to this trip that Aid to the Church in Need had financed 1.5 million euros. It's about $1.8 million in scholarships for Christian, well, not only Christian, but for students to attend the Catholic University of Erbil. Give them an opportunity to learn, to develop professional skills there on site, and to continue this Christian presence there, which is so, so important. Not only Aid to the Church in Need, but also so many other Catholic organizations are present there, helping so much to keep the Christian presence in the Holy Land and in these ancient places such as Iraq. The Knights of Columbus doing work, donating millions of dollars to rebuild the Nineveh Plain, the Christian presence there. The reconstruction project that's going on there at the moment, and has been ongoing since ISIS was beaten back. Catholic Relief Services, Caritas, all Catholic organizations working on the ground there to do so much good. I see it's a time of celebration as the Pope is there with the Prime Minister still at Baghdad's International Airport as he begins this first of 3.5 days of visiting the people of Iraq, from state authorities to religious leaders to the Christian community, the Catholic community. They're spread throughout Iraq, but in particular present in the northern Iraqi region of Iraqi Kurdistan. It looks like the Prime Minister is saying goodbye for now. Pope Francis moving on to his vehicle, where he'll be transported to the presidential palace for a meeting with President Barham Ahmed Salih Qasim. Then further with meetings with civil society and authorities and the diplomatic corps, and after that moving on to the Syro-Catholic Cathedral of Baghdad for a meeting with seminarians, priests, bishops, religious, catechists, to round out this afternoon, this first afternoon of events after his touchdown at 2:00 p.m. local time. Again, this is live coverage on EWTN of the Pope and his apostolic voyage to Iraq, where he's going under the theme of "You are all brothers," as what he called himself, a pilgrim of peace and of fraternity, reaching out to encourage the Catholic community there, all Christians of Iraq, and also reaching out to other religions there in the birthplace, the homeland of Abraham, the father of the three monotheistic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. This is Alan Holdren, EWTN's Vatican Bureau Chief, signing off for now. We'll be back at the top of the hour for the events that will follow this one, beginning with the courtesy visit to Iraq's president. and welcome back to EWTN's wall-to-wall live coverage of Pope Francis' historic trip to Iraq, where he's got this visit underway. Just an hour ago, he arrived to the international airport of Baghdad. Now he's set to arrive at the presidential palace, where he'll be meeting in a courtesy visit with the president, and afterwards he's expected to give a speech to the diplomatic corps, civil society, and authorities. Then to follow that, he'll be moving on to the Syro-Catholic Cathedral, Our Lady of Salvation Cathedral in Baghdad, for a meeting with bishops, priests, seminarians, catechists, and religious. It's one thing you don't expect is bagpipes. The sound of an Iraqi marching band there leading Pope Francis into the presidential palace. This is incredibly reminiscent of the historic papal trip to the United Arab Emirates in 2019. It was 2 years ago, almost to the date. February of 2019, Pope Francis went to Abu Dhabi, where he did one of the things that we expect him to do during this trip as well, is invite interreligious groups and all of society to human fraternity, which is this brotherhood among peoples and religions Pope Francis is constantly advocating, to the point where he wrote an encyclical letter. About a year and a half ago, he released that letter on the feast of St. Francis. October the 3rd, he signed that letter and sent it out to the world, and that was called Fratelli Tutti, all brothers. Just as his namesake, St. Francis, Pope Francis is inviting to fraternity, to peace among peoples and religions. And this trip he'll be doing so by visiting the birthplace of Abraham, the father of the monotheistic religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, in a place called Ur in the south of Iraq. He'll be meeting with interreligious leaders. Expect him to speak more about that concept of human fraternity. It's one of the key components of this visit. And the other primary focus is on visiting and encouraging the Catholic community there, all Christians present in Iraq, which is an historic millenary tradition of Catholicism, Christianity in Iraq, dates back to the first centuries after Christ. Pope Francis exiting the vehicle there to be greeted by President Barham Ahmed Salih Qasim. See, all are wearing masks, everyone, including the Pope, everyone in the papal delegation. Also journalists have been vaccinated over the last month, 2 doses offered through the Vatican. That was one of the primary concerns to the Pope traveling at this point during the pandemic, was would everyone be safe from potential transmission of COVID-19? And second major concern, of course, was security. It still is. With rocket attacks coming just days ago against targets in Iraq. These were the national anthems of both Vatican City and Iraq. Always very impressive to see the local military. It's interesting sort of a paradox that you have the Pope coming as a pilgrim of peace, but actually these are the keepers of peace. You hope that the military will be proposed in that sort of a light, and there we see doves, white doves, being released into the air as a sign of peace. It really is a hallmark and a theme of this visit. The Pope taking the theme, along with the local people there, of "You are all brothers." And on the official logo, there's a dove with an olive branch, and also you see written in the 4 major languages of Iraq: Kurdish, Arabic, Aramaic, and English. "You are all brothers." We expect the Pope to be speaking about that repeatedly over the next 3.5 days. He's spending March 5th through the 8th in Iraq, traveling across the nation for meetings with state authorities, with interreligious leaders, and also with Christians, with Catholics in particular. We see a couple of children offering flowers to the Pope upon his arrival. The President of the Republic there showing the Pope around the presidential palace, which was conceived as a royal palace by King Faisal II, the head of Iraq from 1953 to 1958, at which point he was assassinated. And from then forward, it's been known as the Palace of the Republic. This was actually where Saddam Hussein would meet with visiting foreign heads of state. And it became, with the American occupation of Iraq, it became the seat of administration for the American-led forces and the U.S. Embassy. And since 2009, it's been back under direct Iraqi control. You see the President introducing the Pope to a delegation. These are all of the formalities of visiting head of state, the Pope being the head of state of the Holy See. You see the official trappings of a state visit. The President of Iraq, this is Mr. Barham Ahmed Salih Qasim, was born in 1960 in Iraq, in Sulaymaniyah. He received his bachelor's degree in civil engineering and construction from Cardiff University in 1983 and his doctorate in engineering and statistics and computer applications from the University of Liverpool. He's educated, all of his college work was done in the United Kingdom. He also served as Prime Minister of the Kurdish regional government and later as Prime Minister of the Iraqi Kurdish region. He was elected in 2019 as the President of the Republic of Iraq. He's married and he has 2 children. These are the formalities of any papal visit. The scenes from the beginning moments of any moment that the Pope goes on a foreign voyage. We saw first a meeting with the Prime Minister at the Iraqi International Airport in Baghdad. And now we have this meeting at the Presidential Palace. These initial greetings will be followed by a courtesy visit to the President and a meeting with the diplomatic corps, civil society, and authorities. And after that, later on this afternoon, there in Baghdad, the Pope will go and meet with bishops, priests, seminarians, religious, and catechists in the Syro-Catholic Cathedral. Beautiful weather there in Baghdad today. It was awfully windy there, gusts of wind at the airport. It looks like things are quite nice for the Pope there. Hopefully that continues over the next 3.5 days as the Pope makes his way to the south and then to the north, flying out always from Baghdad in the morning and then returning in the evening. The Pope, as is customary at this point, at least under this pontificate, he sends out a video message as he departs from Rome to a foreign land. Oh, we saw a video message that was released ahead of this trip, and he said, "I'm coming as a pilgrim, as a penitent pilgrim, to implore from the Lord forgiveness and reconciliation after years of war and terrorism, to beg from God the consolation of hearts and the healing of wounds." He said, "Yes, I'm coming as a pilgrim of peace, seeking fraternity and prompted by the desire to pray together and to walk together, also with our brothers and sisters of other religious traditions, in the steps of Father Abraham, who joins in one family Muslims, Jews, and Christians." To follow this trip, in addition to these live broadcasts that you can see on EWTN's main broadcast on cable and satellite worldwide, you can also follow by way of social media, the broadcasts on Facebook, at EWTN Vatican, if you'd like to follow along. And feel free to send us a message, send us a line, send us a question if you'd like. And you can also follow all of the coverage, written coverage, by way of Catholic News Agency and the National Catholic Register. There's a great piece written by Father Raymond de Souza. It's published on ncregister.com, speaking about the trip that John Paul II was supposed to make in the year 2000, in the Jubilee year, where he wanted to go to Ur in Iraq, to the birthplace of Abraham as the father of the monotheistic religions, and to start a pilgrimage there that would have gone through also the Holy Land and Cyprus. That didn't happen in the end. It wasn't possible. Saddam Hussein was against the visit, and so Pope Francis now coming to make a trip that John Paul II should have made, that he planned to make. And so Father de Souza in his piece speaks about the roots of that wish of the Pope, but then also who was Abraham and how is it that he influenced the faith of so many to come, the multitudes that would come from his fatherhood. There, a gust of wind blowing the Pope over there. Pope looking strong there at 84 years of age. These trips are so busy. He's going to be spending so much of his time in public over the next 3.5 days. But it really is his personality. It really brings out the best in him. He loves to be among the people, and it's been over a year since his last international trip. This is his 33rd over the course of his 8-year pontificate. But it's been a tough year of just holding tight here in Rome, weathering the pandemic, and now having been vaccinated and taking all of the measures that could be taken, he's on the road. Here, if you're just joining us at the Presidential Palace in Iraq, is Pope Francis about to take part in a private meeting with the President of Iraq. It's Barham Ahmed Salih Qasim. This, I would expect, is President Salih Qasim's wife being introduced to Pope Francis. As they retire, they will be exchanging gifts. We can expect that the Pope, as is customary now, will give also Salih Qasim a copy of his document on human fraternity, which is called Fratelli Tutti, all brothers. It's become a mainstay among the gifts that the Pope gives to a visiting head of state. Anyone who visits him here at the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican gives him a copy of his encyclical, which invites all of us to consider each other as brothers. This idea of human fraternity that he's been advocating for, and also did 2 years ago in that important meeting in the United Arab Emirates, where he signed a joint declaration for human fraternity with the Grand Imam of Egypt. Here we see all of the pomp, all of the official protocol offered to a visiting head of state. Military honor guards, the bands that welcome the Pope outside. And here the Pope getting a little tour of the presidential palace before he sits down with the president. Pope often signing a guest book, a book of honor, as he is welcomed inside to presidential palaces. There they were showing him something which we weren't able to see. They're walking down the Great Hall now. And at the end of this hall is the hall where the meeting with the authorities will take place, where we'll hear the first major speech of this 3.5-day papal visit to Iraq. An historic visit. If you haven't been joining us up until now, this is the first ever visit of a pope to Iraq. Pope Francis making this trip despite some of the risks, both because of the pandemic and also security concerns, but doing so, according to local bishops there, doing so justly, going to visit and give words of encouragement. Edward Penton, the National Catholic Register's correspondent in Rome, interviewed Archbishop Michael Najib of Mosul, which was a city taken in 2014 in the north of Iraq by ISIS, and since has been freed, and the Christian presence, which was reduced to nothing, is now rebuilding, also thanks to Archbishop Najib. And when asked about the Pope going there at this point in time, even just 2 days ago, rockets were fired in Iraq. There was an attack that took one life. The Archbishop told Penton that if there were no violence, no problems in Iraq, why should he come here? It would make no sense. He says the people need it now. People need these words of encouragement. They need the Pope who says that he comes as a pilgrim of peace. And here he is in their midst. He said at his Wednesday general audience this week and that he wouldn't miss it. He had said that he was coming and he wasn't going to forego this trip no matter what would happen. And against COVID, he and all the others in his delegation have been vaccinated, so here they are. The president inviting the Pope to take a seat there as they sit down for a courtesy visit, which is a private visit. It won't be long now, or we'll have that first speech of the Pope to diplomats and authorities, civil society, there in the presidential palace. Of course, we're not privy to the conversation with the Pope. It's funny to see a conversation taking place that we can't hear, but it is scheduled to be a private visit. You know that the Iraqi president studied in Great Britain. So we're unable to hear the language that he's using. We assume it would be Arabic, but it could also be English. There's a translation being provided there simultaneously. The Pope always with a translator by his side, also in his visits with heads of state inside the Vatican when needed. He speaks obviously very good Spanish, being from Argentina, and also Italian, as he grew up with it, his grandmother being Italian. But he also studied some German. He attended some courses in Germany, and he also knows a bit of English and a bit of French and a bit of Portuguese. But obviously it never hurts to have the whole story, have a translator by your side to help you out. So the use of an interpreter, especially in a place like Iraq, is essential. So shortly to follow this courtesy visit, the Pope will be speaking with about 150 people that represent society and culture, the diplomatic corps, entrepreneurs, and political and religious authorities there in the presidential palace. He's got a prepared speech that we will be privy to. That's a public speech. And we'll be bringing that to you live, as all of these events throughout the weekend. If you're just joining us, this first ever apostolic trip of a pope to Iraq will be going from March the 5th to the 8th. Very important trip for the Christians of Iraq, who have had such a difficult time with all of the unrest of the past decades, and in particular having to deal with the ISIS invasion of their cities and takeover of certain cities in the north. The Pope will go and visit. There are incredible stories of that Archbishop Michael Najib. He was, before he became Archbishop, he was a Dominican priest, and is particularly focused on preserving ancient manuscripts. So stories of him smuggling out all of those manuscripts from Mosul ahead of ISIS's arrival. So many families that fled before ISIS. Many were also given the opportunity by ISIS members to either convert, to pay a tax, or to leave. So many decided to leave with their faith intact, such a strong faith of the Iraqi Christians, Iraqi Catholics. Many of those who fled are now returning, and it is hoped also that the Pope's presence in Iraq will be an encouragement to the Christians who have left, for them to come back. There are so many that have left forever. The official numbers were up over 1 million Catholics, Christians in Iraq in 2012-13, and now we're down to official numbers at about 590,000, according to the statistics released by the Vatican earlier this week. The population has really been decimated by the unrest there, by the persecution there. We expect the Pope to address that during his time in Iraq. That will be one of the key focuses of this trip, the other being interreligious dialogue and human fraternity, which will continue to be brought up. If you watch this wall to wall, you will hear the Pope inevitably speak about that. This is one of the main reasons that he's gone to Iraq, to invite people to brotherhood, beyond religion, beyond ethnicity, to feel part of one human community, and to uphold each other with the dignity that every human being deserves. You can see the hall there in the presidential palace. About 150 people expected to hear the Pope's words there. State, civil, religious authorities all gathered. This is a hallmark of papal trips. The Pope, when on a state visit, he inevitably has a meeting of this sort, an encounter with civil society and authorities. And it often begins the trip, his first moments being encounters, in this case with the Prime Minister and the President. And then he moves on, as he will this afternoon, to visiting the local Catholic community. And so we're going to wrap this up for now, and we'll come back in just a little bit with this ongoing coverage of the Pope's trip to Iraq. He's taking part in a courtesy visit with the President, a private conversation at the moment, and it'll just be a matter of minutes before he's back to give an important speech here to the diplomatic corps and authorities, civil society, entrepreneurs, religious leaders in the great hall of the presidential palace of Iraq. My name is Alan Holdren, coming to you live following this entire trip of Pope Francis to Iraq. Historic first ever for a pontiff traveling to this beautiful and ancient civilization, the cradle of civilization. Join us for coverage all throughout the weekend, up until the Pope's departure on Monday. Thank you for being with us.